kind of an interesting, I don't know, interesting screw up on the part. So I've been writing a app for well, it's for World of Warcraft, but what the app is for server uptime. Like so World of Warcraft has, let's say, 50 different servers that you play your character on, and you might be interested in when the servers are down and when the servers are up. Now, while it's possible for a server to go down at any time, it could be in the middle of the week and just something happens, something bad happens. Typically, that's not an issue. So I would say the real issue is on Tuesdays when they have server maintenance. So they either restart the servers, it's usually down for 2 or 3 hours, or they apply a patch where it's down for even longer than that. So what you have is you have these video game addicts that just sit there and they just keep trying to get back into the server, get back in until it finally comes back up. So, Blizzard says it's going to be back up around 1 p.m. So around 12:45, they're hitting login over and over and over again until they finally get in. It might be like 3 p.m. They might have some issues with the patch or something. So the idea is for this app that you would have you'd be able to go in, see the list of all servers and whether or not they're up or not. You can then favorite the ones that are interesting to you. And then you can even set up push notifications where it'll automatically send you a push notification to your phone when your server comes back up. Kind of a interesting thing. But the point is that it's only really useful, I think, on Tuesdays. So happens when World of Warcraft's down on Tuesdays, all of their other games are down as well, because what they do is they take down Battle.net, or Battle.net, which is their whole website suite and stuff, including the API for checking realm status. So the one day that you really want that data, their API isn't available. Isn't that stupid?
Can't you have a external server that's just pinging the API and then?
Well, no, that's the point. Is the API is not there?
No, I know. And just have a Boolean expression that says if API is pingable, then.
Well, no, that's fine. But what the point is that the only day of the week that data is even useful is on Tuesdays.
So it's a pointless thing.
It's like a pointless thing. Why have an API that gives you realm status, whether the realm is up or not, when the one day of the week where it's guaranteed to be useful, it's not available? And this is from arguably actually, I don't know if it's arguably, and they might officially be, but let's call it the richest video game company. Yeah, they have to. If they're not number one, they're in the top 3. I have to think they're probably one. Yeah, World of Warcraft really filled their pockets pretty heavy for a long time. And then StarCraft has not been any slouch either. Probably their weakest game is Diablo.
Really?
And probably.
I would think Diablo goes before StarCraft.
No, I might even argue that StarCraft might be their most valuable game.
Wow.
Because they have a lot of professional tournaments and stuff for StarCraft. So I bet you there's a lot of stuff where they get endorsements, things or whatever with BlizzCon and then they have Hearthstone, but cool game, but that's certainly not their big money maker.
Blizzard is number 3.
Behind
Microsoft at 1 and Sony at 2.
Because the console game.
So the consoles? I bet you that might almost be skewed. I wonder if Microsoft and Sony are getting to count revenue from games that run on their platforms or something.
Probably. Well, they get games from Diablo 3, which is running on their platform.
Right, but do they get credit for Diablo 3 PS3 sales? Or it really depends on how those numbers are.
Oh, like if they buy them online through the store.
Yeah, does that become revenue for Microsoft and Sony?
No, these are
I don't know. I know they have their name on a lot of games. Anyways. So it's kind of interesting as to whether, how much involvement do they have to have. Microsoft and Sony, they'll bankroll a game, but it really didn't come out of their shop. It came out of so-and-so's shop. But regardless, they're in pretty good company there in terms of having some money. You would think they could have some smart enough guys to make their API available on Tuesdays.
So can you
send them a skate
somehow get a hold of them and ask them if they can release the...
Well, I will. Here, so I'll refresh the screen.
So it's pretty much consoles are beating.
Oh, wait, it's back up now. It was definitely down this morning. maybe since they were applying a patch, maybe because I know today is officially actually a patch day, not just normal maintenance. Maybe there was a period where it was down because of that. So maybe it's not quite as stupid as I originally thought. Still inconvenient. Okay. So that means that this guy should be. Oh, wait. Oh, that's their website. That's their website. All right, yeah. It's back live now. It's just dumb. Okay, let's get into Angel.
Looks like they added a new API. Like they updated the API itself from what I read on the screen.
No, that's 2011.
Oh.
Old. Okay, lessons.
That Angel is really slow again.
Is it?
I can't get on the Wi-Fi. Can't get on Angel. Great.
Right. You see my surprise Monday.
The internet was down yesterday.
Internet
Yeah.
every morning at 2
I
a.m.
live off campus.
And then it's really till about 12.
No, it was down even before that. When I got up at 7:30, it was down. I think Angel's finishing again.
Come on. You got this. You got this. All right. Shut up. We got it. Got our list. Okay, so let's go through each of these. I'm happy to cover any of this stuff. You want to look at some examples. I will go on with new material today if you don't have questions, but feel free to take today's class period to ask any questions you want, anything you want me to review, and I will. Test is Thursday. Test is Thursday. So I put the study guide up for you to ask questions today, and then the test is going to be Thursday. What, you thought it was today?
Yeah.
Did you prepare?
A little bit.
My entire weekend. I never said the test was today, did I?
No. I would think next week Tuesday, but
I mean, I had a couple of freaked out students email me and ask. You asked, right? Yeah. So, yeah. Test is this Thursday. So, the test will be short answer, essay. There will definitely be programming on the test. Definitely programming.
something
Okay.
we've done.
I would call it a programming-centric test. That isn't to say there won't be some questions that are short answer essay. Many questions will be write a little snippet of code to do this, write a method to do this, that type of thing. Okay? I will try to design the exam to take about 45 minutes. You will have the entire hour and 15-minute time period. Now, that isn't to say that there might not be a time stress because, I'm going to try to make the questions, the programming questions, simplistic enough that you should be able to finish them in the time period. That isn't to say if you are weaker or you haven't been keeping up on stuff that you might struggle with it and it might take you longer. Because I know programming isn't something that happens really fast for beginning programmers. So I'm not going to ask you to program really complex things. I'm going to ask you to kind of show competence in programming through simple, small examples. But my idea of simple examples where I think you should be in the class right now may not necessarily be in line with your idea of simple. Make sense? Okay. Now, one thing I do want to throw out there, for those of you who've had me before, maybe you're used to this. My job as a professor is to give you a grade at the end of the semester that's indicative of how well you've mastered the material. Having said that, some of you are going to walk in and bomb this midterm. And that's going to hopefully give you kind of a wake-up call as to where you are in your programming competence. Having said that, we have another opportunity with the final. What I typically will do is I will look at your final. Let's say you get a 30 on the midterm and you get an 80 on the final. I won't average an 80 and a 30. I will do something where that 30 becomes a significantly higher score. So that, because you've shown me by the end of the semester it eventually clicked. That makes sense? So, I want you to take the exam seriously. It is important. But at the same time, don't get freaked out if it just doesn't go well and things haven't clicked. I've been teaching programming for a while, and it's not easy. And it's one of those things that if you just keep putting in the time, and struggling with it, figuring out all this crap, all the stuff that doesn't work, you eventually will get it. It eventually will click. And things that are taking you 5 hours to not get now, you'll be able to do in 5 minutes. But you have to just put in those hours. I know it seems like it sucks because it's not like an English class or something where you just throw 3 hours on a paper and you're done. Programming is really one of those things that, early on in the semester, I usually compare it to like a professional sport or even just, any sport. You don't just start being good at basketball. You got to practice it and eventually your skills improve. That's going to mean you're going to spend a lot of hours that have to do with learning all the things that don't work or making little mistakes and learning from them until you finally can start spending less time and accomplishing more. That kind of makes sense. So having said that, take the exam seriously. I want you to prepare for it. But if you don't do well, I would encourage you to come talk to me. Don't just immediately flip out. Okay? If you got a 0 in the midterm, that does not mean you're going to fail the course. You get a 0 in the midterm and then don't do well in the final, we might see each other again. Well, you'll probably see me again anyways. I teach almost all of the upper division classes, but I want you all to succeed, and I know how programming works. I make it look easy when I write it, and that's not the case. Okay, I've been doing this for a couple of weeks. What is that? Don't they say you got to stay at least 2 weeks ahead of your students? It's about where I am. About 2 weeks in front of you guys.
Programming.
Yeah, that's actually when a professor teaches a new class for the first time, when you introduce a new class into the curriculum or it's their first time teaching the class, sometimes, they're learning the material just slightly ahead of you guys. I mean, the idea is they should be able to absorb the material very quickly. It might just be new stuff as opposed to, they're an idiot or something. But, the thing is, as long as you stay a day in front of your students, you're good to go.
So you're saying you're on fall break right now?
Right. I'm on fall break. Well, no, I
You'd be off fall break,
I
but
prefer summer break. Get more good golf weather. Although this is a good week. Actually, I'll put in a plug for this. I'm looking for able-bodied people that can lift a lot of weight for tomorrow at, we're probably leaving campus around 4:30. I'm putting a hot tub into my garage. And I need, we're picking it up from a guy's house in Richfield. And it's really heavy, and I need as many people as possible. I'd rather show up and have too many people than show up and not have enough. Yeah.
Idea, get thick PVC pipes
Yeah?
and lift up one edge, roll it, put another one under, roll it.
Well, we're going to put it into a pickup truck.
Okay, good.
So we'll have it in a pickup truck for transport.
No, but when you want to move it, get into the driveway,
Yeah.
do that. That's what we did.
You will not get it up his driveway.
They're not too bad if they're empty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking the thing's probably going to weigh about 500 pounds.
Probably.
And if I get 6 or 7 people around something that weighs 500 pounds,
You won't pick it up.
huh?
You won't pick it up.
Really?
No.
Yeah, there's no
No.
big.
We moved mine this summer and it was a bitch.
But if I get 6 college students, they can't.
We had 8 of my dad's friends and we could barely pick it up.
How big was this tub?
7 people.
Yeah, that's what this one is. It's like 550 gallons. It's only supposed to weigh like 515 pounds or something.
When are you
But it's so
leaving?
big.
Well, right. That's why you get everybody all around. What's up?
When are you leaving?
To pick it up
Yeah.
around 4:30 p.m. tomorrow. So we're picking it up around 4:45, taking it back to my house, which is about 30 minutes from there. So that's 4:45. My house is about 10 minutes from campus. So I would say you'd probably be back to campus by 6, safely.
Bring our bathing suits.
Well, it's not going to be hot yet. But we probably can do some sort of hot tub cookout type of party or something like that,
250 party.
250 party.
I totally realized just how close you live to me too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not far from campus.
No, I live in Grafton there, so.
So in any case, if you are available tomorrow and are willing to help move that, I'll feed you and stuff. we'll get some good food out of it. But no pressure. I will not hold it against you if you're not available.
I'll bring the goats to the party.
Okay, so let's talk about this
Wait, we got
midterm.
goats afterwards?
The goats are not allowed in the hot tub.
Damn it. But I need to check it off my bucket list.
See, we had a funny, I say incident, but whatever. In operating systems yesterday, we had there was a student who missed class, and then his roommate, they live off campus, was late to class. So we were talking about the midterm, and it just happened to be that the subject we were on was talking about threads and processes. So I just said, maybe there was some multi-threading going on, and people took that a strange way. And all right, so let's talk about this midterm. So definitely going to be on there. How do human beings solve problems? So we have to remember stuff, ask questions, repetition, and then how do programming languages emulate that? Types of programming languages. So this is all those slides. There are two kinds of programming languages. There are three kinds of programming languages. So we have functional, procedural, object-oriented. We have loosely typed. We have strongly typed. We have what else we got? General purpose, domain specific. Interpreted, compiled. Oh, those are variable types. Yeah, those are variable types. Any other kinds of languages? Okay. So Java would be an example of a general purpose. Well, we skip one. High level, low level machine code. So Java would be a general purpose, high level, object oriented, strongly typed programming language. Okay, that makes sense? So that's what I'm talking about there with the types of programming languages. Variables. So in general, the different kinds of variables. Shut up! Different kinds of variables. Primitive types versus object types. So I might ask you a non-programming question to tell me the difference between those, for example. But also you should understand the concept of variables in Java, creating variables, changing them, that kind of stuff. Okay? Primitive types versus object types. So that's kind of what I just talked about. Boolean expressions. Math and Boolean operators. Truncating versus rounding. Variable scope, where a variable's accessible. Conditionals, that's our if statements. That's our number 2 on our list of how do human beings solve problems, ask questions. Loops, number 3 on our list, repetition. The string class and the string methods. So things that you would be responsible for are going to be like char at, and index of, and substring, and 2 uppercase, and 2 lowercase, and length, and equals. Anything else? Huh? No. What's the other class? Class versus instance methods. I would be very, very, very surprised if I didn't have a question on there, something along the lines of, how do you call a class method? How do you call an instance method? How can you tell if a method is a class method or instance method at the method definition? How can you tell if a method is a class or instance method if you see it being called? I'd be very shocked if that doesn't make the test.
So you're saying the exam is not done yet?
Oh, I haven't even come close to writing it. Yeah, no, that thing's getting written Thursday a.m.
Wait, I thought you were 2 weeks ahead.
Huh? Oh, no, that's paperwork.
Oh,
No, in terms of knowledge base, I'm comfortably 2 weeks ahead of you guys.
okay.
I feel very confident with that.
2 weeks times 20 years, it accumulates over the years.
It actually ends up being a good thing, because you know how sometimes you get into your upper division. Shut up! I'm telling a story. You know how sometimes you get into your upper division classes in different majors, and you have a couple of people a couple of students that are really advanced. They've done this stuff before. They're kind of just in college for the degree, and they actually know more than a professor.
I've seen that.
I always think it's funny. When that happens to me, somebody shoot me. I mean, I do have that going for me. I'm terrible at paperwork, but I think I'm pretty competent. I'm crazy, but I'm competent.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're probably more like 10 or 15 years ahead of us.
Yeah, I would say at least.
2 weeks.
I do okay with the computer science stuff.
I think crazy is another thing.
Now throw me in an English class. No. Or almost really any other subject, probably. Probably. But fairly solid at computer science stuff.
I like to see an art.
Not good at art.
Seeing the theater. I think that would be hilarious. I think you'd do great.
Oh, I actually would be okay with that. Yeah.
Hilarious.
I have pretty good stage presence.
Do you?
Well, yeah, I do. Actually, just generally, I have a lot of presence. All right. Class first instance methods. The new keyword, our real estate agent, the dude to go get memory for us. Polymorphism. More than one method with the same name. More than one method with the same name, but a different number and or type of parameters. Variable name does not matter. If something takes 2 integers, it's the same as another method that takes 2 integers with the same name. Doesn't matter if in one of those methods it was int A, int B, and the other one it was int C, int D. Polymorphism does not care what you named your variables, it cares about the type. Polymorphism also ignores return type. So if you have 2 methods that both take 2 integers, that both have the same name, and one returns an int and one returns a boolean, those are the same method from a polymorphism perspective. Okay? I had a couple of people ask questions regarding polymorphism. Polymorphism versus overloading a method. Now, first of all, I'll throw this out there. If you go and look up polymorphism on Wikipedia, you're going to get about 9 different definitions. The polymorphism I refer to is actually something called ad hoc polymorphism. It's not important. This polymorphism is a scary word that kind of means a lot of things. From our perspective, as we apply it to methods, it means what I've advertised it meaning. So if we talk about that versus overloading a method, which is what some people have found, and they thought, oh, well, isn't that kind of what I've said about having more than one method with the same name and or type of parameters? Not really. Overloading really deals with inheritance, which we haven't talked about yet, but it doesn't have to be inheritance. If we talk about it in the same world as polymorphism, polymorphism would refer to the existence of more than one method with the same name but a different number and a type of parameters. Overloading would be the act of writing a second method with the same name but a different number and or type of parameters. But the better example of overloading would be if you write a method with the same name and exactly the same parameters, which would be a more local copy of the method than what you may have gotten from a parent through inheritance. Okay, so that would be method overloading. I know we didn't really discuss that. That's not going to be on the test. But if you're grappling with the difference between those, the short version is polymorphism is the existence of that type of thing. Overloading is the act of actually making that thing and bringing that thing into existence.
But this method override, when you like I have a super class and
Yep.
override the method.
Yep.
It's different. Override and overload. In Java, I know this.
Yeah.
In the concept of
It's
difficult.
well, it's still in Java. These aren't even official Java terms. It's more of an object-oriented term. Overloading would be creating.
Like I'm not to have a signature.
Yep.
And have a type, a name, and parameters.
Yep.
And when I have a different signature, I have a method overload.
Oh, if you same name, but a different number and or type of parameters. Okay, gotcha. And what would you say overriding is?
Override when I have a superclass.
Okay, so overriding is the inheritance version. Overloading would be the local version. Okay, I'm fine with that. But both of those are the act of doing things. Okay, both of those would be the act of writing a new method. Polymorphism is the existence of more than one method. That make sense?
Can you do an example in code?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me just finish this list and then I'll go back and take any questions.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be number one. We'll do example polymorphism. Pointers, another thing that'll be on the exam. Return, break, and continue keywords. Concatenation, string concatenation. I can see that becoming very important in some of the programming questions. Historically, I like asking string manipulation questions. I've kind of advertised in here that strings are very important in Java. I like to say that Java is a string-centric language. So if you can get anything into the format of a string, you can pretty much do anything you want with it. Concatenation becomes a very important thing, as is parsing. Being able to represent data within a string and pulling meaning out of that string. Make sense? All right. So you want me to show an example of polymorphism?
Yeah.
All right.
Probably an example in this code.
Let's get rid of this crap. Sure, that was useless, unless it was related to the homework assignment I was going to give you, and then you have to write more code yourself.
We have homework
That
tonight.
was the quiz.
Huh?
We have homework tonight.
I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
Simulators.
And not only do I not write exams, I typically don't decide about homework assignments until we get to about 3 minutes before class is over. And if something ends up making sense, then we do it. Or if I just feel like torturing you. It's a hobby. I would say chances are my intent is not to give you homework so you have time to study for your exam. That would be my intent. But don't cross me during class or I might change that. Remember, I'm crazy. Just turn around to this heartbeat. All right, so we're going to write a method here. Int do something, and this guy's going to take an int a. And let's just say this guy, here I'll do another little example. We'll print out a, and then we will return a plus plus. Okay, so this is actually going to be an interesting example. First of all, is this a class method or instance method? How do you know? Static. I'm looking at the method definition. At method definition, we can tell the difference by the static keyword. How do we call class methods? Name of the class in which the method was defined. So I'm going to say int answer is equal to hw.doSomething, and we'll pass it a 5. What does do something do? It takes an integer as a parameter. It displays that integer to the screen, so it should display a 5, and then it returns a plus plus. So what's it actually going to return in this case? 6? 7?
Well,
I don't know where we got the 7. Explain that one.
sorry,
You didn't return
Yeah.
A after manipulation.
I saw two.
It came in as a 5.
Yeah.
We printed the 5. What does a plus plus do?
That's one.
It adds 1 to it permanently, right? So that's equal to saying a is equal to a plus 1. The difference is when we say plus plus, this guy boils down to the current value of a and then increments. So in this particular example, that increment was wasted because the method immediately ended, right? But this operation right here, this statement, boiled down to the current value of a, not a plus 1. That's why we got the 5 up here. We passed in a 5, we printed out a 5, 5 became 6, but this guy turned into a 5 before we incremented it. That's why we got 5 on both sides. As opposed to saying plus plus a, which would increment a first and then boil down. So this will print out a 5, then a 6. Make sense? So kind of reviewing the difference between plus plus a and a plus plus. If you remember back when I introduced those things, I basically said never use those unless you understand the difference. Okay? Or at least never use them within a single line expression unless you understand the difference. If we say this, A++ on its own line, and then we return A, it didn't matter whether we said A++ or plus A. It happens in its entirety before we get down to this line. That makes sense? The only time it made a difference is if we tried to do the plus A or the A++ on the same line as, in this case, the return statement. Then we have to have that knowledge of how does the plus operator actually work. So my advice to you is never use the plus operator within a single line expression until you completely understand how it works. Occasionally I'll use it, but almost always I will write code that is easier to read than code that is has less lines. I kind of prefer it. Keep in mind, somebody else is going to have to come and look at your program later. So, this is one of those things a lot of people try to show off by throwing pluses all over the place, and then I think their code becomes hard to read unless you know exactly how those work. All right? So, unrelated to polymorphism, but a funny little example. So if I run this now, takes in a 5, prints a 5, 5 becomes 6, whether I say A++ or plus A, then we'll return the 6. So this will print out a 5 and a 6. All right? So this is a class method called doSomething. It takes a single integer. Now, polymorphism would be I'm going to write a second method that takes no parameters. And this guy is going to print out blah. Now I have advertised that it returns an int, so I'm going to go ahead and just have it return a -1. Okay, and remember, there's a difference between returning a value and displaying a value. In this case, I'm doing both. I'm displaying something, but then I'm also forced to return a value. So now I have two methods. Both of them are called doSomething. One of them takes a single integer as a parameter. The other one takes no parameters. This is an example of polymorphism. So up here, I'm going to say int answer 2 is equal to hw dot doSomething, and I'm going to call the one that takes no parameters. And I'll go ahead and print out answer 2. So when I call this version of the doSomething method, it knows that I mean this one because I passed it an int. When I call this version, it knows I mean this one because I didn't pass it anything. That makes sense? This answer will be 6. This answer 2 will be -1 because this guy always just returns -1. So the second one's going to print out blah to the screen and then return a -1. So 5 blah. Those are the two print statements. The first one returned a 6, whatever I passed it in, +1. The second one always returned a -1. Now what if I write another version of this? And this guy's a void. This is illegal. Why? Oh, well, it's illegal anyways. Why? I have different return types, don't I? One returns an int, the other one returns a void. Why is this illegal? You have to think about this from Java's perspective. When I call a doSomething method, passing it no parameters, Java's not going to be able to differentiate it between the two, between which one I mean, because I have two of these that both take no parameters. Java doesn't look ahead and see whether or not I'm capturing the value, because I'm not required to. I don't have to actually store the value coming out of a method. So Java's not going to look at the int or the void to use that to differentiate those two methods. This is illegal. Polymorphism is more than one method with the same name, but a different number and or type of parameter. These two methods have the same name, but they both take 0 parameters. Those are in conflict. Now, I could write a third version of this, int a, comma, int b. And maybe this guy prints out a plus b, just adds them together. So now I have a third version of this method, also called do something. This one takes in two ints, two integers. Java doesn't care what you named your integers. So I could not write another version of this method having an int c and an int d. Both of those take two ints, okay? So Java recognizes this as do something that takes an int and another int. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add the two ints together. So this is a third version of that method.
So that in A still be a 5.
Well, I haven't even called that method yet. So this int a is whatever a holds down here. I haven't actually called it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now we'll go ahead and call that guy. We'll say int answer 3 is equal to h homework.doSomething, and we'll pass it a 7 and a 13 as my two parameters. Now right off the bat, this doesn't like it. Why not? What's wrong with this line? Look at our method definition down here.
Oh, you're trying to set it equal to something, but it's not returning
Yeah,
anything.
this guy returns void, does not return a value. So setting it equal to something does not make sense. Does that make sense? So now it's happy with it. So this particular call to do something, 7 will get passed in for the A, 13 will get passed in for the B. Similarly, I can call it a second time, and I can pass it a -4 and a 2. So that second call, -4 came in for the A, 2 came in for the B. Does that make sense? All right. And so I run these, it just adds them together. So it's able to differentiate between all those methods. It knows that if I call do something and I pass it a single int, I mean this one. If I call do something and I pass it nothing, I mean this one. If I call do something and I pass it 2 ints, I mean this one. And just as a quick example here, is this legal? Can I say, well, I took 2 integers here.
You didn't use them. Doesn't matter.
I was stupid taking 2 integers,
Just do it.
but I'm not required to use those. Does that make sense?
You just take two integers so you can make it work with the same name.
Yeah, so this method here doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's a method called do something that takes 2 numbers and does nothing with them. This guy just spits gotcha out to the screen and returns nothing. But I'm in no way required to use the inputs. Typically you would use the inputs, but sometimes you don't use all the inputs. Depending on the nature of what you're writing, sometimes you might take 2 or 3 inputs, and it's possible that one of those inputs, depending on what it is, might dictate that you do something, that you avoid doing something. So you may not use all the inputs necessarily. But the point of this example is you are not required to use those inputs. But typically, if you take inputs, you're probably taking them for a good reason. All right? So this would be an example of polymorphism. Now, according to you, you're saying that when I wrote each of these, when I wrote this version, that was overloading. Correct? When I wrote that, I overloaded this version of the method. Whereas if I was doing inheritance, I would have been overriding. Right? So this is an example of polymorphism, having 3 methods with the same name but a different number or type of parameters. The act of writing those, he wants to call overloading, which I'm fine with. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just words. At the end of the day, overloading and overriding, they really mean the same thing. The question is where you got the method from. Was the method locally defined, or did you inherit it through a parent? All right, does that clarify polymorphism?
Yeah.
All right, other questions? Other things you want me to... Go ahead.
I didn't really understand how you could use a string without defining it beforehand, and then print it
out.
Okay. So for instance, I could say string s is equal to hello, like this. And then I could do system.out.println s.length. Similarly, I can say system.out.println elephant.length. This kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So remember how variables are resolved. At runtime, before we execute any of these lines, it's going to go through and it's going to resolve those variables. So s actually gets resolved to its value. S's value is a pointer with points up to memory where the actual string lives. When this guy ultimately is resolved, it's going to be like saying hello at runtime. Does that make sense? So that's the resolution side of it. Now, I'll go ahead and put S back in here. So the reality is this guy actually just skipped a step. We didn't force resolution. All right? This guy's a string literal. A literal is already its final value. Now, length, so here we can review another aspect from the midterm. Is length a class method or an instance method? Remember, you're seeing me call it right now. Not seeing me define it, you're seeing me call it. Instance method, how do you know? How do I call instance methods? Instance methods I call using an instance of the class in which the method was defined. Class methods I call using the name of the class in which the method was defined. Instance methods I call using an instance of the class in which the method was defined. So I'm calling this method using S. S is an instance of the string class. That make sense? And officially we can say an instance is anything that is a string. An instance of the string class is anything that is a string. We can probably simplify that and say an instance is anything that is either a string literal or resolves to a string literal. Make sense? So this guy resolves to the string hello, so that is a string. This guy requires no resolution because it already is the string literal elephant. Each of these are calling their length method. This length method, being an instance method, knows about the instance that called it. Okay, this guy's usually called the calling string in this case, the calling instance. So length might have other stuff in there, although it doesn't take any other parameters, but length knows who called it. So it knows that the length of elephant is 8, and it knows that the length of S, which is actually hello, is 5. It can calculate that. That make sense? If we go to the char at method, this guy really is getting 2 pieces of information from that call. The first piece of information it gets is it knows about the instance that called it. So the char at method automatically becomes aware of hello, what S resolved to. So it's almost like a free input, a free parameter. But you don't pass it because it already gets it from the instance method call. But we also have to provide it a second parameter. That is the position within the calling string that we want to retrieve the character. Does that make sense? So this guy is going to resolve S to hello. Then we're going to grab the character at bucket 1, which is the E. This guy doesn't need to resolve anything from elephant. Then we're going to grab whatever's at bucket 0, which in this case is also an E. Make sense? We could say bucket 7 if we want. That'll get us the T. So, Nate, does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
So I guess at the end of the day, maybe the way you were thinking about it is almost backwards. Instead of saying, why don't we need a variable for everything, the reality is it always becomes a string. It always becomes a string literal at the end of the day. Just a matter of how much resolving we have to do. Although if you look at it, this is the more comfortable syntax, right? We like calling it with method, or we like calling it with variables because it just looks cleaner. Like this almost seems like a waste of time. Like why did I say elephant.char at 7 rather than just putting in a t? Right? Why hard code that string? So it doesn't make tons of sense there, but we've seen some examples where maybe it makes some sense. Like when we've used like mapping strings to map something to a certain bucket with index of or char at. Sometimes you may only need to do that once. So for instance, if I'm detecting if something is a val, pick your favorite char, let's do a C. This is going to boil down to, in this case, a -1. In this case, it'll boil down to a 0. In this case, it'll boil down to a 1. In this case, it'll boil down to a -1. Index of returns a -1 when it did not find it. So sometimes I won't need access to that string A, E, I, or U later. I don't need it I don't need to store it in a variable somewhere. It's really a throwaway string that I'm just using for detecting something. That make sense? So in a situation like that, it may make sense to go ahead and just hard code the string in. But at the end of the day, you're really not hurting yourself by putting it inside of a variable. So that might, maybe to a lesser degree, it might fall into that same category as whether you use ++ something or something ++ in line. Why not just throw everything in variables and know you have it stored somewhere? And the worst that happens, you don't use it more than once, so you wasted a little memory. Better to waste a little memory and get it right and understand your own code than try to get slick with it and make a mistake. So having said that, I would say probably always use meaningful variable names then. If you're keeping track of a person's first name and a person's last name, don't say string S is equal to their first name and string S2 is equal to their last name. Call it string F name is equal to their first name and string L name is equal to their last name, or something like that. Make your variables meaningful. Give them meaningful names. So 300 lines later, when you're using something, you don't have to remember what kind of value you stored inside of a variable named S. Make sense? Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
So for methods so far, have we only used types string, int, and boolean?
That's possible, but I mean the return type for a method, because a method is the generic syntax for a method is, for us, we always write class methods. So static followed by a type, which is any type we know about. So we know about strings and we know about all the primitive types. So those would be fair game for a method for us. Followed by method name, followed by an opening parenthesis, then a comma delimited list of parameters. Yeah, so it's possible we've only written ones that were void, string, int, or boolean, but there's no reason why we couldn't write one that returns a char.
You go over the return break and continue keywords.
Sure. Let's call this blah. So I'll write a little method here. And we're going to say I'll just start off with this. So blah just creates a loop, goes from 0 to 9, prints it out. All right, we'll go ahead and call blah. So it's a class method. So we say h1 dot or hw dot blah. So there's our 0 through 9. So that's what this guy does currently. Now, for return, if I is equal to 0, I can say return. A return immediately makes a method end. If this was not void, I would have been forced to return a value, some value there. But you can always use the return keyword to immediately kill a method. All right, so this is really a wasted method. Call blah, we create a loop that goes from 0 to 10, or 0 to 9. The very first time through, it is 0, so we end the method. So this guy has no output. If we set this to a 2, we'd get a 0 and a 1, and then we'd be done. That make sense? That's what return does. Continue means skip this particular iteration. So I'll print out a 0, I'll print out a 1, then I is 2, so what it does is just goes right back up here to our 3. So this will print out 0, 1, then 3 through 9. Make sense? So continue says skip this iteration and move on with life. Now that isn't to say, what would the output be if I moved that print statement before the if? It would print all of them. Because remember, it's going through linearly. So each time through, I'll print out the current value, then I'm asking the question. If it's 2, spin to the next thing. Well, you know what? I was going to spin to the next thing anyways as soon as I hit there. So kind of a waste of time, but this will print out all of them. So back to the version where it prints out 0, 1, then 3 through 9. Break breaks us out of the most local loop, not to be confused with the if statement. So break will break us out of this if statement, or the for loop, and put us right here. So this will print out a 0, a 1, then we notice that I is 2. We'll break out of this for loop, immediately ending the for loop, but not ending the method. So break is kind of like return, except break gets us out of the current loop. So this will be a 0, 1, then here. That make sense? All right. More questions? Pointers. So pointers, easiest to show it in here. Huh?
Isn't everything a pointer?
Yep. So most of the textbooks say something along the lines that Java doesn't have pointers. The reality is everything in Java is a pointer. Maybe just about everything in Java is a pointer. A pointer is a primitive type variable capable of holding a memory address. So whenever we use the new keyword, a memory address somewhere up in memory is being found. And I probably have a slide here. It's got to be in here because I like drawing pictures. Yeah, here we go. So, for instance, when I say string s is equal to new string hello, this new keyword goes and gets us a memory location. Actually, hold on. Let me, just so I can show you the difference here. Let's go like that, because that's the example it's currently using. So when I say string s is equal to hello, what it does is it goes ahead and looks at the string literal memory and finds that, okay, hello's not there, so it generates an address for us and stores hello up in memory. S, being an object type, actually holds the memory address. So in this case, we would say S is a pointer. Well, we'd say S is a variable whose value is a pointer, which points to an actual object in memory. So in this case, S is the memory address 100, which points to the string in memory, which at position 100 in memory, that is the string hello. S2, we requested some new memory. So even though it's the same string hello, in this case, we actually put it in a new place. We didn't use the string literal that was already in memory. So S2 is going to request new memory using our new keyword, which is our real estate agent. So we're going to say the operating system comes back and says, okay, the memory I've set aside for you is position 733. So we're going to go 733. So S2 will actually hold the memory address 733, which points up to some place in memory where the actual object lives. That makes sense? And we saw it by example. If I come back into the code here, good way of showing this, I'll say random r is equal to new random. Random r2 is equal to new random. System.out.println r. System.out.println r2. And it's going to want me to import java.util for random. So I'll just do that here real quick. All right, so I created two random objects here, R and R2, and then I'm just printing out the value of each of those objects. And we'll see that it actually is a memory address. More importantly, we'll see they are the same, or more importantly, we'll see that they are not the same memory address, because we made two separate calls to the new keyword. We said, real estate agent, go find me memory. Real estate agent, go find me memory. So these will be two separate memory addresses. Different values here. That makes sense? It's harder to prove this with strings, because if we say string S is equal to hello, string S2 is equal to hello, and then we print out S and S2. Actually, let me do this. New string. So if I say string S is equal to hello and string S2 is equal to a new string hello, and I print out S and S2, they're both going to print hello. Because the println method knows to automatically go and look at the string's toString method. So from our perspective, these still seem like the same thing, right? But we can prove that they actually are different pointers if we try to say, is S equal to S2? Remember the double equal sign? This is for primitive comparison. So this is not going to compare the contents of S and S2. This will compare those pointers. And it's going to be false because S and S2 are not the same pointer. Make sense? So there's our false. They physically hold different memory addresses. So this example right here is the same thing as we were just looking at in this slide. I created one string, I create a second string. Their values are different values. Similarly, their values would be, also different if I said S is equal to a new string hello. So every single time I make a call to the new keyword, I'm getting a new memory address. Strings are special in that we can create a string in Java kind of like we can create primitives. I usually refer to that as syntactic sugar. Okay? But the reality is what it does is for all of your primitive types is it has a literal version of memory set aside in the Java virtual machine for storing literal values. So already built into that place is going to be all of our digits, 0 through 9. All of our letters of the alphabet, well, really all the Unicode values, and then any strings that we create, string literals that we create. So this will still be false. Good.
So then if you took out the equal and threw in boolean dot equals, then would that make it true?
That makes it true. this is the, well, first of all, class method or instance method? Instance method. How do you know?
The instance S.
S is the calling string here. So I have two strings involved in this guy. S is the instance of the string class that's calling equals. S2 is the parameter. See, I had the advantage there. I saw it swinging shut. Everybody flipped out. That was so funny. Joel almost dove under the desk. All right. So in this case, equals is an instance method. We know that because it's being called with an instance. Okay. S will ultimately resolve down to, well, S actually, so this kind of goes back to you, Nate. There's kind of double resolution here. S resolves to its value. S's value is actually a pointer, which then gets resolved to the value in memory. So in this particular case, S gets resolved twice. Does that make sense? Okay, so the reality is there's two levels of resolution with strings. But ultimately you end up with the actual string. So in this case, equals is the name of the method. We're calling it with this particular calling string. And then it also takes in a single string as a parameter. We're passing S2 in as that. So now this will be true. Similarly, if I say S2 dot equals S, we're going to get the same result, but in this case, S2 is the calling string. It's the instance that called that method. So equals already knows about S2 in that case, and we have to provide it with S for the second parameter we want it to compare itself to. But in this case, it's comparing the contents of these strings rather than the pointers, the memory locations. Make sense? All right, other questions? Go ahead. Sure. So we can have a normal loop. So we can say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. And that'll print out 0 through 9, right? The equivalent while loop this would actually be an example where somebody might choose to do something like that. Say I++ inline. This is the type thing I would say don't do. It'll work in this case because we'll print out the current value of I, which is 0, then I becomes 1. So it'll work the same way, but is it really worth confusing yourself if you can just write it on the next line? So these two loops accomplish the exact same thing, but there is a slight difference. So we see 0 through 9 and 0 through 9. So as written, they have the same output. But with the second one, if I print out I here, I'm going to get the 10. So remember, as we walked through here, I started off at 0. Is 0 less than 10? Yes, so print out 0. 0 becomes 1. 1 less than 10? Yes, print out 1. 1 becomes 2. Finally, we'll print out 9. 9 becomes 10. Is 10 less than 10? No. So we'll fall out of the while loop, but we'll still print out that 10. So now this version prints out the 10 because I did become 10 at the end. Then we spun back up and we failed the Boolean expression then, when 10 was not less than 10. So that's when this was false, and that's when we dropped it right here. Next thing to do is to print out the current value of I, which is 10. So this will be the second time through. This will print out 0 through 9, then 0 through 10. 0 through 9, 0 through 10. So then what will the output be if I do the same thing up here? We get 0 to 10 and 0 through 10? That's what I was hoping you were going to say. Why is that not the answer?
Oh, because the last time they spin to the top.
This has to do with this guy right here, variable scope. I, up here, is a local variable that lived and died with this for loop. So when we get down here, Java's never heard of I. Down here, though, I is a local variable to main. So it's accessible anywhere from this point on inside main. So if we hover over this, it'll say, I've never heard of this. I cannot be resolved to a variable. Finally, so we'll take that out. So that's one difference between a for loop and a while loop. So while loops give us a little more flexibility with scope if you need to do something with the variable outside of it. But we could have actually pulled that off with a for loop by just defining I before the for loop and then giving it a starting value inside there. So we could have accomplished the same thing. Now I is a local variable to main in that example. Finally, a do while loop. Do all this stuff. So we'll say system.out.println. We'll do this one on J since we already have an I defined. While J is less than 10. Now we'll define a J before the loop. If J is equal to 0. And we'll print out 0 through 10 for that last one. I'm sorry, 0 through 9 for the last one, same as we did before. But the difference between a do while loop and a normal loop is do while loops execute the body of the loop at least one time. That means that if we say J is 500, where we expect it to fail, it'll print out 500, 500 becomes 501, then it fails. That make sense? For loops, while loops are pre-check loops, means the body executes 0 or more times. Do while loops are post-check loops. We will always execute the body at least once. And notice that for a while loop, there is a semicolon at the very end. That is in very rare situations will you ever see a semicolon at the end of a statement. That typically becomes a beginning programmer mistake where you put semicolons at the end of every statement. All right, so stop there. Exam is on Wednesday. If you have any questions between now and then, Thursday. Exam is on Thursday. If you have any questions between now and then, feel free to email me, text me, flag me down the hall, whatever. Happy to help. See all of you then. Bible study today. Go to the cafeteria. Put your name on the sheet. You get free lunch. Then take it down to the terrace room.
So wait, the exam is on